Here we go. Okay, good morning, everybody watching us. This morning it is December 11th here in Tokyo, and where our special guest today is still December the 10th. Well, welcome to everybody to the podcast, and thank you for joining us. Today, I would like to introduce to you our guest, Saskia Rock, and tell you a few words about her before we dive into the topic, which is cross-cultural consulting in business and bridging cultures actually in business. But before that, I would like to say thank you to our sponsors, Kanachu and James Howell. You already know about them. They do real estate business. They are based in Yokohama and do property management and investment property. Also, if you want to sell or buy real estate in Tokyo and Yokohama, they may be your people. If you want to work with them, which we strongly recommend, please reach out to James Howell on LinkedIn. You can talk with him at james@kanachu.com as well. Remember, kanachu@kanachu.com. That is your real estate agent, your partner. And now let's continue with introducing our guest, Saskia. I'm very, very happy to see you here today, Saskia. Welcome. And let me tell our listeners a few words about you. So, first of all, Saskia is Japan-focused human resources and business consultant. She's based in the US, and she's the US representative of Japan Consulting Office, right? And I'm very happy to meet you here as well because of one more thing. We are actually alumni of the same university here, Globis. That is the Globis School of Management. I was so really excited when you said, yes, we can have you as a guest speaker today because of this reason as well. But I don't want to really keep anybody waiting, so I'll let you talk about yourself, your Japan story, and how you ended up doing what you do, Saskia.
Okay, well, thank you very much. But I want to congratulate you because graduating from Globus, it takes quite a bit of effort. So, congrats to Maya for graduating
Oh,
this
thank you.
year. I graduated
Hats
10
off.
years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, hats off. I graduated 10 years ago, and it's part of it's a very important part of my story. So, um, let me go back to the beginning.
Yes.
I am originally from Belgium. I was born in a little town in Flanders, so that means that my native language is Flemish Dutch. So, growing up in Belgium, we have three national languages. You learn, of course, depending on where you grow up, you have your native language, and then you learn the others, French and German, in my case, at school. And of course, you also learn English at school. So, being, loving culture, loving languages, I wanted to study a very different culture and language when I got to university. And I decided on Japanese because when I was growing up as a little girl, I saw this Japanese TV show called Oshin. And it was about a little Japanese girl,
Yeah.
growing up during World War II in Japan, very difficult circumstances, but she becomes this very successful supermarket owner. And I thought that was so, so inspirational for me as a little girl. Plus, these beautiful kimono and, very different language. I thought, wow, I want to know more. So that's why I decided to go and study Japanese. And I did that back in Belgium. So I graduated with a master in Japanese studies without ever having been to Japan.
Hoo-hoo. Wow.
Yes,
That's
yes.
an achievement in itself. Yes.
hmm
Yeah, yeah.
And so then I was able to join the JET program, Japan Exchange and Teaching Program, not as a teacher of English, which is the most common route, but as a coordinator for international relations in a little town in Japan that had a sister town in Belgium. So I went to Ishikawa,
Okay.
Komatsu City, and again, like never having left Europe, never having been on a plane, even, I stepped on this plane. I went away for 12 months. at a minimum, right? To go
Yes.
to go work
Yeah.
over there. And so and I think a lot of people who learn Japanese outside of Japan can relate to this. I landed in Komatsu after studying Japanese for 4 or 5 years, and I couldn't understand a thing
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
because my
Okay.
my I learned NHK Japanese, and I landed
Mm-hmm.
in a place where they speak Matsuben, right? Dialect. And
Right.
I was like,
Yeah.
I don't understand what you're saying. And I'm supposed to translate and interpret, and I don't know what's going on. So it took me a couple of weeks to get used to the local lingo.
Right.
But I loved that year. I loved living in that very, like, well, we say inaka, right? But I mean that in the best way. It's like very local
Shiho.
Japan. Yes, regional Japan. I love that. That was my first experience with Japan because people are so nice, so welcoming.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, this was 30 years ago. So, not a lot of foreigners around. So it was just the best experience. And after that, I'm gonna fast forward because I went back to Belgium. I worked 10 years in an office in Belgium. We had some Japanese clients, so of course I was asked to visit the clients, and I always kept the link with Japan. But I really got back into really working with Japanese culture when I started my own company at age 32. And how that happened is I was playing Japanese drums in my spare time. And we became so popular that we started earning money. And so we decided, okay, let's try and make a job out of this.
Hoo-hoo.
So for 5 years, I was playing Japanese drums on stage. I was using drums and also other cultural things that I learned, like flower arrangement, ikebana, like
Mm-hmm.
the tea ceremony, chado. I was using that to explain Japanese culture to mainly European employees in Japanese companies back in Europe. So why is this culture so different? And so we were called in for incentive days and all of that. So that was a
Mm-hmm.
lot of fun. Then some of those companies came to me and said, "Oh, but you know so much about Japanese culture. Can you help us with these cross-cultural issues, with these communication issues that we're having between our expat managers and our European employees?" So there I rolled back into explaining more deeply about Japanese culture, Japanese business culture, and giving people tools to, work better and more efficiently together.
Yeah.
So did that for 5 years. And then as a business owner, and, like you, Maya, you probably decided just like I did, I need to know more finance. I need to know more accounting. I need to know more business if I want to be a successful business owner.
Yeah.
So lucky. I heard about Globus. I was like, okay, I can kill two birds with one stone, do an MBA, and go back to Japan.
Right.
So that was my motivation. And at Globus, you don't only learn all those things I just said, but they also really help you think about what your purpose is
Yeah.
in life and in business. And so for me, it became really clear that helping people work better and, crossing this, helping people cross these bridges toward
Mm-hmm.
each other
Yeah.
was really what I wanted to do. So when I graduated, I was able to join one of the big four, the Deloitte Tomatsu in Japan as an HR person. So I was working in diversity and inclusion, and then I was doing global talent development, and I was planning to stay in Japan forever. And then how did I end up here in the United States? Well, I mean, as usual, I'm sorry, Tim, it's the fault of a man. Everything that goes wrong in
It's
life,
always
it's
our fault.
also it's
Always.
also you. It's always you. So I met this wonderful guy in Tokyo. He happens to be Japanese, but he is a software developer and he spent most of his life working in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So we met. He told me from the beginning, if we like each other, or if you like me, you will have to think about going to the United States at some point. And so it happened in 2018. Because of his job, of course, we end up close to Silicon Valley. And so I came here. I couldn't continue the same job I was doing in Tokyo at Deloitte because this job doesn't exist in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So, I just went to different companies to get experience working in HR again. And then last year, um, my friend Olivier, who is Belgian and who I graduated Japanese studies with back in the day, back in Belgium, he came to me and he said, "You know what? I started this company called Japan Consulting Office, and we really would like to expand our business in the United States. Are you interested in joining us?" And I said, "Well, sure. I do have a full-time HR job, so let me start with you on a part-time basis." And I did that. And since this year, I've gone full-time. So there we go.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just love doing the work. Like this morning, I had 3 2-hour sessions with, a big Japanese bank here in the United States, explaining differences in working together and how can you bridge these differences. And it's super fun. So
Yeah.
this is where I am today, just, trying to build the business, trying to, um, and actually, like I don't like saying like build the business, to be honest, because I'm still not a business person. For me, it's really about helping people. And of course, if I don't have to go work at an actual company to earn my living, then it's just plus, right? It's
Yeah.
extra. So that's where I am. I'm just trying to help people and trying to make a living from it as well. And so happy to meet you both as well through LinkedIn. And now, we have so many connections, right? Maya is also in Globus. Tim happens to have done the same job that I'm doing right now, the cross cultural communication thing. Tim lives in Atami, which I want to retire to. So there we go.
Well, we want you to come here. We need more folks like you here. So,
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Well,
yeah,
Saskia, you mentioned something.
no, I was
Sorry.
just gonna say,
Yeah.
your story resonates because I didn't really get into this full time. I did it working for other companies
I
in,
see.
in the US, Japanese companies, and they would always call me in after everybody was fighting. And then so my job was to calm everybody down and get them oriented and educate both
Yep.
sides. But
Yep.
my dream job didn't come until I was 42, and but I can say in my career, and that was like the last 18 years of my career, is absolutely the most fun I've ever had working. It's the
Mm-hmm.
one job that I was passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
I've said this many times to Maya. If there was one thing I hated, it was the travel. But I just like being around my family. But so I agree with that. I resonate, and the idea of helping people, that just has. I get this incredible feeling when you see people start out in a bad place and you bring them
Yep.
together and they end up in a good
Yes.
place. So
Yes.
I
Yes. Yeah.
completely can relate.
Mm-hmm. Well, hey Tim, you did it faster because I'm 50.
Huh?
There you
Okay.
go. You beat me by 8 years.
Well, I guess I just bumbled my way into it somehow.
The same here. It's Bumble too.
No
So
plan.
no plan. It just happened that way. Yep.
Yeah. Well, once again, one thing that they teach us in Globis is that dots connect backwards and everything goes, the evolution of our careers and lives is not linear.
Yes.
Sometimes we have to go back and, step forward again. So I think that what you just told us, Saskia, is really a good example of what they teach in Globis when we talk about purpose, finding your purpose as a business person, as a just an individual as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, but I want to
Great.
go back to one thing you mentioned while talking about your story, and you
Mhm.
said that here in Japan, when you worked for Deloitte,
Mhm.
Komatsu, and then you
Tomatsu.
worked
Yes.
Tomatsu, and
Yes.
sorry for Tomatsu, and then you worked in HR. But then when you went to the United States,
Mhm.
such jobs were not available. So I mean, what you were doing here in Japan, so you couldn't do exactly the same thing.
No.
And why do you think that is the case?
Well, what I was doing, so in Japan, I actually helped start up the DEI department. Or at least, I mean, the DEI department, when I joined, it was really little. They didn't have any like real policies written out, they didn't have a website. So I helped them create all that. So I was really at the beginning of that DEI story at this company. Now, DEI in Japan and what DEI means in the United States is a very different thing. Japan, especially when I was there, it was all about, okay, the difference between men and women, and let's help women to, have a real career or be able to come back after they have their children, right? In the US, it's way, way advanced beyond that. It's about equality between, all people, different races, different nationalities, different ages, right? So it's a
Mhm.
very, very different focus. And I, coming in as a European with experience in Japan, I had no real understanding of these specific American issues that are at the forefront. So I couldn't come in with, oh, I know what to do here, because I had to
Right.
learn,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah. And of course, a lot of the work that I did at Tomatsu was, very specific towards the non-Japanese population of the company. How can
Mhm.
we help them to feel more at home? Very simple. Translate all your emails. How can we make sure that they don't leave the company? Because there's a much higher turnover compared to the Japanese
Yeah.
population. Well, again, easy. Organize events, make sure that they feel connected to the company. So those are the things that I was really working on, very invested in, but they didn't translate to HR here in the United States. Yeah.
Right.
Mm, mm, mm,
Hmm.
mm, mm.
Well, yeah, that's really interesting because again, nowadays Japan is very much into DEI as well, but I still think that well, it's probably an evolutional curve, so that probably the next step here in Japan will be not only men and women, it will be
Hmm.
probably the age
Yes.
gap. They will have to
Hmm.
bridge it because yeah, they don't have much choices, and probably after that they'll reach the point where they can talk about bridging the differences between employees of different cultural backgrounds.
Yes.
Yeah, so
Hmm.
Yeah, to that point, there are so many words that if you look them up in the dictionary, you say, okay, the Japanese say this, what's the English? And then you get the English. And if you have simply a translator, not a cultural translator, they're going to assume in their translation that those terms have exactly the same definition. And that's
yeah,
where the hidden gaps lie. And
Hmm.
DEI is one, but you could go through a whole bunch. What does it mean to manage? What does it mean to make a
Right.
decision? What does it mean?
Hmm.
All these terms that we conveniently look up in the dictionary have totally different
Hmm.
meanings. And I've seen
Hmm.
so many misunderstandings because both sides were assuming they meant the same and they were
Yep.
talking past each other with good intentions, right?
Sure.
So the
Yes.
DEI angle is interesting to me because I've
Hmm.
never been in that space. So I appreciate you
I
bringing
see.
that up.
Yep, yep. No, and but DEI, I mean, it's definitely connected to what you just said of differences in management, things that you can get away with, as a Japanese manager back in Japan would get you a multi-million dollar lawsuit here in the United States,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So that is
indeed.
yeah.
that is one of the things that myself, separately, but also as part of Japan Consulting Office, we're trying to help these companies here who get these expats who have to do some kind of management, help them understand that they have to be very careful in how they talk to their subordinates, because if you would make a comment on somebody's hairstyle, for example, they might say, oh, you're harassing me, right? A certain way of like formulating a request might come across as an order, and they might say, I'm being harassed. And it's much easier. I mean, it's still not as easy as it should be here in the States, but compared to Japan, it's much easier to go and complain. There are many roads that you can take to complain inside the company. If inside the company doesn't work, you go outside the company. And companies are very afraid of that because there are many examples of little things that turned into multi-million dollar
Mm.
lawsuits. And so,
Yes.
unfortunately, Japanese HQ doesn't often realize that they're putting both their managers and the company here in the US in such a dangerous
Right.
situation by
Mm.
not training their people before they come here.
Yeah. And
And
sometimes I,
it doesn't help that they rotate people in and out. So maybe
No.
a new guy comes or a new lady comes, they kind of get oriented, they learn about the American, then they go back and the new
Then they go
person
back
comes in
and
and
they
they
don't
don't
know.
know it. You got to start over, which is good for business actually, but it's not good for the company,
No,
I
it's
mean,
not
good for
good.
the
Right,
um,
right.
yeah.
yeah,
But
yeah,
I also think that sometimes, even if you provide simple training or basic training before people go there, it's still difficult to relate to what you tell them, because if you're not on spot, en situ,
Yeah,
some of those things, they sound like too far away from you. So
mhm.
yeah, I think that basically starting with basic training at home
Sure.
works, but it is not enough, and then you
it
need
has
to follow
limits.
up. Yes, it
It
has
has
limits.
limits.
Oh,
Yeah.
of
I have
course
a
it,
quick
yeah.
I have a
Yes.
quick anecdote that
Sure.
so this was back in the 80s, the late 80s, and my Japanese boss, we were in production control, we're in the US, and they were interviewing people. And one lady came in and during the interview, she mentioned that she was married, right? And my boss says I'm interpreting. My boss says in Japanese, "Well, you're married, but this job requires travel. Would your husband allow you to do that?" And I said to my boss, "I go, you can't say that. Yeah, that's not. You're not allowed to say that. You know." So I think storytelling like that maybe helps a little
It
bit, but
helps.
as Maya said, I think you got to jump into the soup and be a little bit
Yeah.
confused for about 6 months before the training really becomes more meaningful. Maybe that
Yeah,
makes sense a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
And the issue though that we're seeing is these people do not get any training before they come here. They're
right,
dumped in the soup. And then, we get called and we try and give the basic training. As you said, just say, okay, give examples. It's okay to ask people their blood type in Japan, not in the United States. Very, very
right.
simple
Simple.
examples, right?
Yeah,
We
yeah,
also tell them, look, if in any doubt, and maybe even when you don't doubt, if you have to give a difficult message to your subordinate, call HR. Have them sit in with you so that you at least can be sure that they can, just like you did, Tim, maybe give some pointers already during the conversation so that you don't
right,
do things that are illegal, right?
Mhm.
right,
So
right,
Right.
it can be as simple as that, but I agree with you. It's really hard. I mean, even for me, I'm so happy I didn't get that DNI job at Deloitte because I had no clue what it's like to work in an American office. And because
Mhm.
I had these separate experiences at very different companies, now I have much more insight of how
Yeah.
complicated this issue is here in the US.
Mhm. Right.
indeed. Yeah,
No, it's fascinating to me because every country comes with its own culture, and of course, for everything that happens there, there is a reason. And of course, on the other side of the spectrum, here in Japan, when we see expatriates coming here and they cannot make sense of the business practices in Japan, for example, because that's not the way things are done there, where they come from,
Mhm,
I think that it always works to explain why things
mhm,
are happening the way they are, right? Because there is a reason behind everything. And
mhm.
for people, usually when you give them the answer to the question why, why, for example, why does every decision take so long in Japan? Then if they don't have to agree with it, and usually they don't, but they make sense of it, and they can become, let's say, more strategic about their ways.
Right.
And I think you feel the same on the other side of the spectrum. So you give explanation why things are so complicated in the United States, I believe, and why you have to be so very careful there when you deal with American workers. And when I say American workers, once again, we know that in the United States, the diversity is so much, how can I say, complicated, right? Because you have people from different, not only different walks of life, but also different countries and different cultures and everything there. So, and how do you deal with that? Do you explain everything? I mean, every single thing, why things are so, once again, complex there to
Right.
your clients, or how do you deal with that?
Well, you can never explain everything, right? So I
Yeah.
think the first thing that I start off with is an explanation of different cultures, and of course we use the iceberg model, right? You cannot understand what you can't see, but also my personal take is just start from kindness. It's assume good intent. And I
Mhm.
always tell them, and especially the Japanese laugh, like that's why I'm still married to my Japanese husband, because we assume good intent, right? Because you make mistakes all the time.
Yeah.
We're
Yes.
from very different cultures, so that's what you have to do. And then, of course, you go into some details, as you said. Why do decisions in Japan take so long? On the other hand, why do people here in the US want to move so fast?
Hmm.
Um, and the interesting thing is when we do our sessions, sometimes we have people who've been working with Japan for 20 years. And they go, often we hear like, from the HR, the HR representative, they were like, oh, why do we have to join this? We've worked for Japan for so long. We know how it works. And then after the session, you hear, oh, now I understand. And that
Yes.
is
Right.
so
Yes.
funny. It's like
Common. Very common.
common.
Yeah.
They've just
Yeah.
been rolling with it and they know it takes very long, but they don't know why. It's so funny. And
And
then we
to
give
the
them
point,
strategies. Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
just the point of intent. I think that's so important because that's where people assume bad intent because they don't really understand what the response is. And one story, it's not mine, somebody else told it, but she was working for a Japanese company and she wanted a bigger desk because she had to keep her files. She was in HR and she had to be able to lock her drawers
Hmm.
and she requested it and they turned it down and it was bothering her because she really needed a bigger desk to store
Right.
stuff. So she goes to her boss and she goes, why can't I have a bigger desk? And this is a Japanese guy. And he says, because you're not professional. And she was so
Wow.
offended. But what he meant to say
Oh,
was
no.
everything's ranked. So if you're,
Right.
a certified accountant or a lawyer, you're
Yeah.
higher in the hierarchy. So you get the bigger desk or you get the hichikakesu,
Right.
the chair. And so she was smart enough to go to him and say, when you said, this was after she fumed for a
Yeah.
while,
Fume. Then,
but
yeah.
you said I was unprofessional. What did you mean by that? He explained it to her and she's like, oh, okay, now
Now
I
I see.
understand. Right.
Yep.
So that's
Yep.
a really
Yeah.
great.
And that's another remark that we often get. Why is it so hard to deviate? Right? Because I mean, does it really matter that she's not a professional accountant? If she
Right.
needs a bigger desk, why can't she get
Right.
it?
Right.
Right?
Right.
Here
Right.
in the US, that would be like normal. You just ask your boss, can I have this? And if you need it for your job, you get it. So why is it so hard in Japan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at the same, indeed, it's really hard sometimes to deviate, most of the
Hmm.
time, actually, But
Mm-hmm.
I think that also that's one of the reasons why the Japanese society is so orderly, because for everything there is a rule, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
then once you stick to the rules to a certain extent, actually to a very high extent, you
Mm-hmm.
do not worry about creating chaos and misunderstanding. You don't worry about actually stepping on anybody's toes, which
Mm-hmm.
immediately convey, well, it goes into the into saying that when you don't step on people's toes, you preserve the harmony and people here
Right.
love it. So
Mm-hmm.
things are connected, and they are, in a sense, they're logically connected,
Right.
but it's difficult to see them in
Right.
this succession.
Right.
Yeah.
And sometimes the process is just outdated, but there's
Yeah.
nobody who's strong enough to change it, even if it makes more sense, right?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I think that in Japan you change the process only when there is something, a big issue with the
Mm-hmm.
process, because
Right.
sometimes processes do become outdated, but they still work, right? They are
Right.
slow, but they still produce results. And
Yes.
because
They're
everybody
incremental too. They would
incremental
much.
too.
It's
Sure.
not that they don't want
Yes.
to change. They just don't want
Yes.
the drastic
Mm-hmm.
change.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
You know. Right. Right.
Yeah.
Because it's risky.
I,
It's
I
Yeah.
agree with you, but all the clients that I have here in the US, they're like, but we have this 10-step process, and
uh
steps 3 to 7 are no longer relevant because we're not using fax machines anymore,
hmm
right?
Yeah.
But still they're there. Why?
Yeah.
Why can't we
Right.
just take them out? So
Yeah.
That.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. But
You made a
well.
remark.
hmm
Go ahead,
But
Maya.
still,
Sorry.
one thing that you said, Tim, is change happens here on an incremental basis.
yeah.
So every and it is actually quite a common thing. The thing is that well, foreigners coming to Japan, especially people from the Western Hemisphere, expect it to be a sudden thing, a radical thing. Once we have an innovation, or we have decided that step
Hmm.
3 to 7 are not necessary, we just go without them. And well, here it takes time
It
to
does.
get to that point. Well,
Yeah.
but well, it's inevitable too, because I know that many people do not agree with others saying, "Well, this is a cultural thing," but you cannot change culture, because culture is the mindset people work with and they come
Right.
from, and
Hmm.
well, it takes time. Well, before we continue, though, I want to say well, a word of thank you to our other sponsor, because it's 9:30. It's 8:30, past 8:30. So
8:33. 4. Huh?
yes, please allow me to do so. A huge and heartfelt thank you to House Inc., our other sponsor. House Inc.
We love
offers
you.
bilingual services in custom home design, construction, and renovations, plus commercial building construction. If you want to work with them, and we do recommend you reach out to them, you need to reach out to Hana Urushizawa Howell on LinkedIn. She's there. Please connect with her, talk with her. And so you can also find her contact details in the description of the video on YouTube. She is available also as a member of Kanachu at kanachu.com. So Hannah at kanachu.com, or connect with her on LinkedIn. So thanks a lot, Housing, and thanks a lot, Hannah. Now we can continue, and well, with more stories, I think, anecdotes from our careers and personal journeys. Yes, but
Sure.
so Saskia, I want to ask you, what is the most common question you get from Japanese expatriates in the United States?
Japanese expats in the United States.
Yes. Or the
Most
most common problem they express to you when you consult them?
it really has to do about communication and English and body language.
Mm-hmm.
Um, one question I had last week when I was at a client in New Jersey is, when I am talking to my American colleagues and they sigh, is that negative or not?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Or another question that somebody asked was, so I'm talking, Japanese person, I'm talking to my American colleague, and suddenly somebody comes past and starts talking, and I wasn't finished with my talk.
Hmm.
Is that normal?
Right.
So, the very differences in culture, where in Japan you don't interrupt people and in the US it's fine, right? Or
Yes.
sighing, like, I I don't, I mean, for me as a European, if I'm explaining something to somebody and they go like, I mean, to me that's not very polite. But I don't know what kind of sigh it was, but that's what I had in my brain. I'm like, no, I don't think that's polite, but maybe they're just tired, Again, I try to be respectful of how
Yeah.
people are
Yes.
feeling.
Sometimes I have
So,
noticed that when people talk and talk and talk with others and they try to explain complex ideas, at the end of at the end of the explanation they sigh. And that is the speaker who sighs. And some
right.
right? But then that sigh most often, more often than not, it is a sigh of tiredness and also sigh of relief, like, oh,
Right.
I have finished now. I can relax
Hmm.
because it's behind me. But yes, in Japan, I think that people here, when they hear you sigh, especially in inner circles, like inner group, like uchi, they say, "Don't sigh because you're just throwing away 1 year of your life." So this is the
Oh,
yeah,
that's
there
new.
is such a yeah.
I
I
never
know.
heard that one. That's new to me.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, I have
Yeah.
been told this many times in the family, in my family, by my
Oh, I see.
mother-in-law and my husband, because there is a belief that when you sigh, actually you shorten your life by 1 year. And I don't know
Okay.
whether it is something typical to Shizuoka, where my mother-in-law comes from. I don't know really, but I have heard it a lot of times, like, "Don't sigh, that's not so good." And,
Okay.
so yeah, it's interesting, really.
Okay.
But yeah, it's
We,
something that,
mm.
yeah, go ahead, Saskia,
No, no,
sorry.
so Tim, we need to ask our spouse
Yes.
if that's
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
thing,
Right.
if that's
Yeah.
a thing where they come from.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Interesting.
yeah.
Interesting. So, just one point you made that I just loved, the idea of kindness. Okay. Obviously, the Japanese need to be trained to deal with the realities of the U.S. or whatever
Right.
country,
Hmm.
that
Yes.
they're in. But so I used to do both sides and then bring them together, right?
Yeah.
And I learned after a while, because I'd hear complaints from the Americans and about things inappropriate that was said and blah 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 blah, right? And what I did, and I found it very effective, because I think most people want to do good things, right?
Hmm.
And I would say to the Americans, listen, you have to be kind and think of yourself as helping them learn about your culture and take these opportunities to, help them, to
Hmm.
try, not only try to understand them, but to let them know,
Hmm.
what is appropriate and what is not appropriate in a very kind way, rather than get angry. you know Lean into the job. Our culture better than they do, and they need help because they
Hmm.
don't know and they have a tough job.
Exactly.
And you know what, most people embrace that
Mhm.
challenge, planting that seed. And so
Hmm.
I just love the kindness theme. So
Yeah. That's
just
that's
just
exactly what I do too. And specifically when I explain how different Japanese is, and I can explain that also as a non-native English speaker, right?
Hmm.
So I give examples of things and I came here when I was already fluent in English, but still there are things in the language that really surprise me, like how they say things, some sayings that they use. So when I explain to them how different Japanese language is, how much that is tied to the culture, that I give examples, like how when what you said also before, Tim, when you translate Japanese literally into English, it can mean something very different. And I use examples like chotto muzukashi, right? It's a little
yeah.
bit difficult. Do you think that's positive or negative? And I get a huge range of answers,
Hmm.
right? We know, of
Yeah.
course, know that it's not very positive because of this harmony, this idea of harmony. People don't want to disappoint you, right?
Yeah.
So when I explain those things, they go, "Oh, now I see."
Mm.
Right? Because I'm sorry, Tim, you're the only native speaker among us, I think, but sometimes they lack awareness how difficult it is to operate in a language that's not your native language.
Yeah.
For sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Um, so to decision making, some of the comments I used to hear, and this is again manufacturing specific.
Hmm.
The Americans would complain the Japanese take too long to make decisions. And Americans really like, let's just do something. Action. Let's do it. You know?
Yep.
And the Japanese complaint was the mirror image of that. They go, why do Americans take action before they understand the current situation, before they understand the problem, before
Right.
they've confirmed a common understanding
Hmm.
of what the problem is? And I always told the Americans, if you want to sell an idea to the Japanese, don't give them your idea. Tell them what you think the current situation is, and then invite them to
Mm.
help you. Either they agree or
Exactly.
disagree, or maybe they'll give you another point of view that'll expand your understanding of it.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
if you skip that important process of confirming the current situation, then you don't
Yes,
have a snowball's chance in hell of getting your idea accepted because you've skipped that very
for
important part of the
sure.
process.
Yeah.
So that's
For
one that
sure.
jumped out of me in terms of questions.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. And another one that, I heard today again, so I just want to talk, tell you a little bit about that one. So one participant in a session today, he said, "So what do I do if we have, a project that we want to move forward with HQ Japan, and they come back and they keep on expanding the scope?" And happens often, right?
Mm.
And I tell them straight out that, we cannot, I mean, what they want to do to expand the scope, the things that they want to do are not useful to the project that we want to do, or it's going to like delay it
Mm-hmm.
so long. So I straight out tell them that, but they keep on coming back in different ways and try to still get us to expand the scope. So what do I do? So I said, well, first of all, maybe you should check with them why they want to expand the scope. Did you ask? No, I didn't ask.
Mm.
Yeah,
Right?
right,
So
right.
why? Why do they want to add all these things on? That's one. And the second one is maybe you can go back and say, okay, not say no straight out, but say, okay, if we do it our way, we can finish this project in 4 weeks. If you want
Mm-hmm.
to expand the scope, maybe it's going to take 3 months. What do you want? You know?
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah. So people keep on asking the same questions. It's very interesting. Whatever industry you're in, Tim, this was banking, you were in
Yeah,
manufacturing, no difference.
same
Yeah.
complaints. Hey,
Same
here's
complaints.
another thing. I did a training session in Tokyo. It was an international Japanese company, and they flew in managers from all around the world. A lot of Europeans, a lot of Southeast Asia, the US, Canada,
Mhm.
Mexico, everything. And it was the first time I had dealt simultaneously with a multicultural group on the non-Japanese side.
Okay.
And I was amazed that their complaints and their gripes were exactly the same as the Americans. I expected different, points, and there were
Mm.
little
Right, right,
differences.
right. Mhm.
But to me, have you noticed that as well? Because I was really kind of shocked.
Well, I mean, as a European, being in Belgium, right? If you think about the low context, high context scale that we're all on, right? Japan is super
Yeah,
high context. Germany, which is a neighbor of Belgium, is and the Netherlands are super low context.
yeah,
Belgium is in the middle. So
Mm.
even though we are neighbors, if I'm in meetings with the Dutch or the Germans, I'm sometimes like, wow, do you say it that straight? You're going to say that people are wrong? Are you going to say this doesn't
yeah,
make sense? Like in Belgium, we wouldn't do that,
Yeah.
right? So
right.
Europe is like it's a quilt.
It
Right,
is
many
well,
different colors, many different pieces.
yeah,
I'm sure Maya has similar stories
yeah,
about Bulgaria and the surrounding countries because it's
yeah.
so different. Yeah.
I think that basically, as you say, that Europe is a very small continent, and we have a lot of ethnic groups there and a lot of
Yes.
countries.
Yes.
And at the same time, though, even though we live so close to one, our history is still different. I mean, the general history about the antiquity,
Mm-hmm.
and then the principles of democracy, and also Christianity accepting it, and how it actually influenced the culture and so on. It's the same, the
Mm-hmm.
framework. But
Yeah.
Right.
when you look deeper into the history of every single country, so just before you realize that there are specific things that actually put us either together or apart.
Mm-hmm.
Because before we started this conversation, you and I, Saskia, talked about Belgium and Bulgaria, how the countries, had been invaded by many other countries, and we had been under different rules and so on and so on. And so in Bulgaria, we're in the same, I mean, more or less the same spot on that spectrum. The tight, the context, sorry, context,
High or
context
low
is,
context.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, and low context and so on. And we are very, very similar to Belgium, because
Mm-hmm.
we have always had those, problems with being invaded and so on. And then when you think about the Dutch, well, they have actually gone out of their way, to colonize other countries.
Yes.
The French
Mm-hmm.
have done the same, and I imagine that they are much in the French too, like the Dutch. Their
Sure.
culture is more low in context. So
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
there are so
Yeah.
many things that we can think about, and nuances there.
Exactly.
But I believe it's the same with, even though Japan, mind you, Japan has a very different industry,
Right.
not industry, a very different history.
History. Yeah.
History, yes,
Mm-hmm.
they're very, yes, high in context, but they are high in context for different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, because of the geographical location, because of the climate, because of the that's the volcanoes and the typhoons
Mm-hmm.
and this and that, and
And history, right? If you
yes, history as well. Yes,
Shogun,
Yeah.
right?
yeah,
250 years,
yeah,
Japanization, no
yeah,
outside influence. So
yeah,
it's normal that they evolve their own very specific way of doing things, right? So,
yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
hmm
yes,
I
indeed.
wonder, I
It's
often wonder how different, I mean, we also know that, if you're going to get nuanced, Japan has a lot of its own subcultures. I think a lot of that's because
hmm
of the
yeah,
geography, the
hmm
mountainous nature of the
hmm
country.
hmm
And really, until the Kamakura period, there was no roads connecting all these
hmm
hmm
places. So it was very
right,
hard to get to. And then,
hmm
eventually you get to the Edo period where basically Japan is united. So they got a little bit more commonality
Yes.
due
hmm
to that, that part of history. But I often wonder, like, how different were they back before that, before those roads
right.
were built. So,
Right.
yeah,
But you
interesting.
you still have like a rivalry between Tokyo and Osaka, right?
Yes,
So, I
yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
people are, or supposed to be very different. Like my husband is from Kamakura, and my
Mm,
first experience living in Japan was, in Ishikawa, which is on the Osaka side. So sometimes
right.
when I talk in Japanese, he laughs. He's like, "Oh, you sound like somebody from Osaka," you know,
Oh, that's
Chiho,
hilarious.
right?
No, that's sweet.
Because,
Yes.
different way of, intonation, different words, or so it's very funny. Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Osaka
It's
Ben,
funny. And
Wakara Hen.
Wakarahen. Mm-hmm.
Wakara Hen,
Also
Osaka
Oba,
Ben. Yeah, that's what
and
I was saying.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember at my previous workplace, we had a colleague from Osaka, and he was
Mm-hmm.
very proud of his heritage, Osakan
Mm-hmm.
heritage. So
For sure.
whenever, yes, and whenever he talked on the phone, he would talk in a very, very high voice so that everybody in the office could hear him, and he
I
would
love
purposefully use Osaka Ben.
Of course.
And
Home money?
so, yes,
Defiant.
Yes.
These,
Yes, yes.
But, you know,
But but he
yeah,
became the mascot, actually
of
our mascot.
course.
Yes, in the
Of
office.
course,
So.
yeah. But in Flanders, which is an even smaller place, we have the same thing. The village that I grew up in, we were close to the language border. So my Flemish Dutch has
Mhm.
French words and German sounds.
Right.
And if we talk to somebody who lives on the Belgian coast, which is just a 1.5 or 2 hour drive away, they don't understand me if I speak dialect. I don't understand them if they really speak dialect, and that's so close,
It's
right?
very close. I have a
Yeah.
recollection, yes, to this, if you allow me to tell you this. So I grew up in the west, so that's the central west part of Bulgaria, but my mother was born in the southwest part. So that is, part of the geographical area which is called Macedonia. It's a geographical
Right.
area, but yeah.
Hmm.
And so my grandparents, when I was a child, I would spend the summers there. And I
Hmm.
remember my one of my very first memories of my grandfather was, telling me to fall down. And I was like, what do you mean falling down? I don't want to hurt myself. But no, in that dialect,
Hmm.
he used the word which for us it's the same word. In my place, my hometown meant fall down, but in his that village it meant actually get down.
Oh, I see. Hmm.
Right? Get down and fall down are two different
Hmm.
things, but we use the
For
same
sure.
word with different meanings. And so,
Exactly.
yeah, and as you say, even in such a small country as Bulgaria, we have so many different dialects, and you too in Flanders, and
Hmm.
so it's a fascinating conversation. I think that we can talk about this in another
Forever.
another podcast, forever. Yes.
Absolutely.
But
Yes,
I
well,
yes.
imagine that, yes, in Japan it's the same because I remember when we went to Akita. And then we
Mm.
went to Akita and we love, the Michinueki, the road stations where they sell local agricultural produce.
Mhm.
We tried to get some apples. And when we talked with the person at the store, my husband said, I have no idea what he's talking about.
yeah, yeah.
Yes. So,
For sure. And then
Even
there's also
even
the
in the U.S.
generational divide, right? Yeah.
yes.
Yeah,
Like
Yeah.
when
yeah,
my
even the
mother-in-law
U.S.
speaks, I often don't understand what she says because to me, I call it Imperial Japanese. I don't understand it. And so we
Right.
have another level of misunderstandings there. Right. But
Yeah.
even in the US, you're right, Tim. I mean, I'm in California now, but when I was in New Jersey last week, wow, people talk so fast. It's crazy.
Wait till you go to
Like
the
slow
South.
down. Huh?
I lived
Oh,
in the
to the
South
south. I've
for
been to
5 years,
Georgia.
and I had a very interesting encounter. So somebody invited me to their house for dinner. So I show up for dinner with a bottle of wine, and they go, "Where were you today?" I go, "What do you mean? I invited you to dinner in Chicago. Dinner means dinner, right at nighttime. But in there, dinner is supper, called supper, and lunch is
Super.
called dinner. So
Oh,
even just at least where I was in Tennessee, yeah, I'm like, oh
okay.
my gosh, yeah,
Right.
Interesting.
one sip.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I felt
It's
very
Right.
interesting.
silly,
Yeah,
you
well,
know.
I mean, but they should have not assumed. And maybe you
Nor
should
should
have
I.
asked. Right? You should have asked. Well, so what time is this then?
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, it was my bad
Uh-huh.
But
too, you know. But I
one more
did give them
thing
a
which
bottle of wine, so I think they were cool with it, you know. So
right. But these stories tell me once again that we all have to be very mindful of such the existence of such
Hmm.
differences,
Hmm.
because most of the time we make assumptions.
Right.
And we make assumptions based on our experiences, based on what has happened to us before. And
Hmm.
very often, not most of the time, but very often, these assumptions turn out to be wrong. And that's why these stories exemplify the need to actually always question what you hear and ask, right? Ask
Hmm.
questions to the other person you're talking with.
Hmm.
Because,
assume the best and ask
yeah,
Assume the
questions.
best and ask
ask questions.
That's my
questions.
rule.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, when I'm in Japan, everybody thinks I'm American. So there's
Ah,
only, white foreigners in Japan. There's only one country they can come from. That's the United States. I'm sure you have the
yeah.
same experience, Maya.
If I don't open my mouth and speak, because my Eastern European accent is very strong, it's very persistent, then people realize that I am not American. But if I don't say anything, yes,
Right. Yes.
yes, it's like, oh, here is an American person.
Right. Well, I
Yeah.
have that even here in the United States because, of course, I live in a place that is mostly white. And so I walk on the street and they ask me, "Oh, did you vote?" And when I say, "Well, I'm not allowed to," they like,
Ooh.
because the only reason
Are you a
as a white,
convicted criminal?
yes, yes, that's the only reason they can think of that I'm not allowed to vote because they all assume I'm local,
Right, 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 right.
right?
Well, your English
That's
is
So
yes.
so good.
Yeah.
I
I'm
can
just lucky.
understand why.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but I mean, they would ask me even without hearing me talk, right? Because, you walk on the street, there's like a festival going on, they're trying to, make people register. They go like, "Oh, hello, ma'am, did you vote? Or are you
Yeah.
registered as a Republican or as a Democrat?" And then I tell them,
Mhm.
"Well, I'm not allowed to vote." And they go,
Uh,
Yeah. I
so
think
funny.
it's funny, but yeah, I have had
Mm,
a similar experience, not the same one, of course, about voting, but in Europe.
right,
So wherever I go in Europe, it doesn't matter what country I am, people always start talking to me in their native language. So they assume that I belong to that country. I was born there. And of course,
right.
I cannot speak all the languages there. It's impossible. But I
Hmm.
noticed that it's really fascinating because that was one of the very first experiences of Europe for me.
I
When
see.
I was still in university and traveling,
I
and I was
see.
like, why would people think that I belong here? And of
Hmm.
course, Europe is very diverse.
For
Like,
sure.
yes, so it's very easy for anybody there to assume that whoever they see is born in their country, but it cannot.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So
great.
yes,
Okay.
Well,
yeah,
I could go on for a long time
Same
with this
here.
conversation. It's so much fun. I enjoy talking to both
yes,
of you.
Hmm.
Swapping war
lots of fun.
stories is what we say in
Oh,
the
for
U.S.
sure.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Well, the only thing that I can say is let's continue the conversation in a month or two.
I'd
So
love to.
yeah,
Yeah.
because there's so many stories and there is so much to learn still. I
Hmm.
believe that we can learn from each other as well. And to everybody who listened to us, stayed with us, watched us, thank you very much for that 1 hour of your Wednesday morning. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you.
And Saskia, thank you very much, really, for agreeing to be with us
Thank
today.
you.
Yes. I'm
All
very much
right.
looking forward to continuing the conversation. And I
Same
also,
here.
great. I also want to say thank you to our sponsors
Hmm.
again. So, Kanagawa Chuoju Taku or kanachu.com and House Inc. So, oh,
That was
yes.
a bit fast. Oh, okay.
There we go.
And I have to say, I connected to James on LinkedIn, and he's so nice. So
He's the
if you have any
greatest guy.
questions, yeah, about real estate, one day when I can come back and I want to buy this house in Atami next to Tim, I'll definitely go to James and get
Yeah.
him to do some research for us.
Right
Yes,
on.
please. Yes, please do that. I'm sure that they will appreciate you as a customer and also try to meet all your needs there. So, huge thank you once again to Kanagawa Choju Taku or Kanachu at kanachu.com and Housing with Hana Oroshizawa Howell. And thank you, Saskia. We're looking forward to actually having you with us again.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
Bye
to
bye,
everybody.
all.
Bye. Have
Bye,
a great
buddy.
Wednesday.